Frances Heiliger, you may proceed with your 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning to my colleagues, to the people of the territory. Good morning to this Mike. There we go. Good morning to my colleagues, to the people of the territory. Good morning to central staff, those in the audience today. I would like to extend a very, very happy holidays to everyone. I hope everyone stay blessed and enjoy the holiday season. I want to jump right into these nominations. I support each and every one of them. I've had the opportunity to attend various hearings and was able to question many of these individuals as to why they chose to serve and why they would like to be that individual in the position to represent and be whether a commissioner or serve on the board. Dr. Janice Valmond, as it relates to the Virgin Islands Housing Authority Board, Dr. Rick Wichammer, the Virgin Islands Board of Pharmacy, Stephanie Hodge, Virgin Islands Real Estate Commissioner, Christopher McDonald, Virgin Islands Real Estate Commissioner, Dr. Dion Wells Hedrington, Commissioner, Virgin Islands Department of Education, Ms. Delia Thomas, Inspector General Office of the Virgin Islands, and Ms. Leona Smith, Virgin Islands Port Authority Board of Governors. I want to hone in on at least two of these individuals. The first one I want to talk a little bit about is our Inspector General nominee, Ms. Delia Thomas. I did have an opportunity to speak to her here within the chambers.
30 seconds.
And I think this position is a very important one, that whenever we have issues within our government, we do have someone there that is more than capable of inspecting and going into these various agencies to report back out so we can make the very needed changes that we need. Also, as it relates to Dr. Dion Wells Hedrington, when it comes to the education of our children in this territory, it is paramount that individuals that are holding this position are exemplary and they fully understand the needs of the future of these children. And I think that Dr. Wells Hedrington will do a very good job, because listening to her testimony and information that she did bring forth here on the Senate floor, I am very happy to be voting in the affirmative.
Time.
Because the children are the future, as we continuously say, but we have to have their best interest at heart. So thank you so much for the 2 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Frances Heiliger. Frances Heiliger, you're recognized for your point of inquiry.
Thank you so much. As we have made the decision to waive the debate time for this specific resolution block, I have a point of inquiry through the chair in regards to Bill number 34-0295, which is the resolution to posthumously pardon to legal counsel. To pardon Rothschild Francis.
Proceed.
What the concern was is after this bill had passed through the Rules Committee, for me personally, I had several discussions back and forth with many in my office, legal counsel, because there seemed to be a back and forth as to whether the President of the United States would have had to do this pardon, or would it have been the governor of the Virgin Islands. I requested an opinion of legal counsel. I asked them to contact Congress and Interior to find out and get a final resolution. So I would like, through the chair, to legal counsel to please put their thoughts and opinions on this specific matter, as well as I have an amendment, if necessary, forthcoming. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Frances Heiliger. Mr. Legal Counsel Cardy, can you please respond to the Senator's inquiry? Please recognize Legal Counsel's mic. It's on now.
Through the chair to Senator Frances. I'm sorry, Senator Frances Heiliger. I apologize. The question with respect to who would issue a pardon, a posthumous pardon in this instance, it is appropriately the governor of the Virgin Islands. And the reason being is because Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution provides that the president has the power to grant reprieves and pardons of offenses against the United States. And specifically, the president's power to grant pardons is limited to offenses against the United States, but he does not have the power to issue pardon for state criminal offenses of federal or local civil crimes or offenses. Now, Mr. Francis was tried in a federal court in the Virgin Islands by a federal judge. However, at that time, the Virgin Islands was under the administration of the United States Navy. Notwithstanding that, the crimes for which he was convicted, specifically libel, contempt, and embezzlement, are not offenses against the United States, but are local offenses. So as a result, it is our considered opinion that the President of the United States does not have the authority to issue a posthumous pardon to Mr. Francis. Rather, because the offenses were local offenses, it is the governor of the Virgin Islands to whom would have the authority to issue a posthumous pardon to Mr. Rothschild Francis.
Thank you, Senator. Does that satisfy your question?
Well,
You have to stand.
thank you very much, Madam Chair. I will say, based on that opinion, which I did request, I am willing to accept it, and we do have an amendment to amend the bill when the time comes up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heiliger. Colleagues, we're going to wrap up block number 1, and we're going to move to the first item. So, Madam Clerk, can you please call up the first resolution? Francis Heiliger, you're recognized for your amendment.
I rise and offer amendment number 34-718 to bill number 34-0295, offered by Senator Alma Francis Heiliger. Bill number 34-0295 is amended in section 1 by striking President of the United States of America and inserting Governor of the Virgin Islands, and by striking federal. I so move.
Amendment properly moved by Senator Francis Heiliger, seconded by Senator Marvin A. Blyden, Senator Franklin Johnson, Senator Dwayne M. DeGraff, Senator Angel Bulkes, Senator Carla Joseph, and Senator Javon E. James. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Roll call on bill number 34-0294 as amended.
Senator
0295 as amended.
Senator Marvin A. Blyden. Senator Blyden, yay. Senator Angel L. Bulkes Jr. Senator Bulkes Jr., yay. Senator Samuel Carrion. Senator Carrion, yay. Senator Dwayne M. DeGraff. Senator DeGraff, yay. Senator Novell E. Francis Jr. Senator Francis Jr., yay. Senator Alma Francis Heiliger.
Yes.
Senator Francis Heiliger, yay. Senator Donna A. Fred Gregory.
Yes.
Senator Fred Gregory, yay. Senator Kenneth L. Gittins. Yes. Senator Gittins, yay. Senator Javon E. James Sr. Yes. Senator James Sr., yay. Senator Franklin D. Johnson. Yes. Senator Johnson, yay. Senator Carla Joseph. Yes. Senator Joseph, yay. Senator Milton Potter. Senator Potter, absent. Senator Janelle K. Saru. Yes. Senator Saru, yay. Senator Kurt A. Viale. Senator Viale. Senator Viale, yay. Senator Genevieve R. Whitaker. Senator Whitaker, yay. Madam President, 14 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bill number 34-0295, a resolution petitioning the President of the United States of America to issue a posthumous pardon to Rothschild Francis for his unjust conviction for the federal crimes of criminal libel, contempt, and embezzlement has been approved by this body as amended, and the governor will be duly notified. You may proceed, Senator Francis Heiliger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon once again. I rise to acknowledge all pieces of rezoning and leases in blocks 2 and 3. But I would like to spend the most of my time speaking on bill number 34-0387. This piece of legislation speaks to the rezoning of 15 acres of property in the district of St. Croix as it relates to Beeston Hill. This is a subdivision which mainly has homes in it. And at the very last hearing that we really discussed this, it was quite contentious. I was very disheartened and disappointed at the characterization of many of the residents of St. Croix within that area and surrounding areas as snowbirds and Airbnb owners. As a responsible legislator, I took it upon myself not only to reach out, but many of them reached out to me very offended at this characterization of the residents of that area. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that all of my opposition has to do specifically with this, because I am in support of anything that has to do with the development of St. Croix, especially when it comes to housing, which a part of this project does. But there are several things I have an issue with. As a resident of this territory, I am very much concerned with the continuous purchasing of property that is zoned in areas for one specific thing, and individuals purchase these properties already knowing what the zoning is for and come before this body and request that they change it just to appease a specific set. I don't have a problem with spot zoning and certain things, but when you decide to take 15 acres of property and change it from R1 to B3,
1 minute.
Not only are you increasing the value of that property, but there's no guarantee that these individuals have any legal obligation to go ahead with this project. Granted, some of the individuals here testifying verbally told us they will continue with it, but I have an amendment coming forward. Whether we decide to push this forward or not, which I don't think we should, it should return back to DPNR for proper vetting, since they verbally told us on the floor they are changing the entire project they submitted. As it relates to the residents in this area,
30 seconds.
one of my concerns, I had a letter from one individual. I am a 22-year-old full-time resident. They spoke to voting. We have one here from their Senator Donna Christensen, delegate to Congress. As a lifelong resident of St. Croix, I'm in opposition. We have another one here. Dear Senator Francis Heiliger, I want to share with you my opposition. I have lived here for 40 years.
Time.
So when you characterize people like that, it is wrong. So apparently my time is up, and I am hoping that we vote in the affirmative in regards to not pushing this piece of legislation and allow it to go back to DPNR where it belongs. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heiliger. Senator Heiliger, you're recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon again to my colleagues. Good afternoon to the testifier. Good afternoon to the people of this territory. My first question quickly, just for understanding, Mr. Pete, how did you get a copy of the proposed legislation that you referenced in regards to comparing what Senator Serou had versus what is in this piece of legislation from the governor?
So, my understanding, I had a copy through the VI Justice Initiative on what bills were coming up on expungement, because their focus, they have 7 different areas for restorative justice, and expungement is one, and I'm the special advisor partially on the expungement.
Well, how did the organization get a copy of the bill? It came from Government House?
I'm not exactly certain.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't speak to that.
I wanted to understand how you
Yes.
guys got it.
I was
Because-
just trying to evaluate, looking at what would help the most, and that's
Yeah.
about all I have.
Well, the reason why I wanted to know is because, you know, as a member of this institution, I have always been a firm believer of first branch of government. And when my colleague has a piece of legislation before me, I genuinely would like to hear what is wrong with their piece of legislation versus having entities come in and make a comparison to something that's not even before us. And when you do that, you create an undue bias towards her piece of legislation that she's brought. And in listening to what several of the attorney Key Walker did, I was very taken back. Because if we are here as an institution trying to see what we're trying to correct or improve with the legislation for cannabis, to listen to testimony where half of it was, yeah, hers is okay, but the governor's is better, that was unfair. And that I just want to put that on the record. Now, what I want to say quickly in regards to the residency requirements, Mr. Evangelista,
Yes,
this
Senator.
quick thought process. With the residency requirement that I heard of some 2 years versus potentially other ideas, what do you think is more appropriate, just giving your opinion in regards to people coming to getting licenses? Do you think 90 days, 2 years? What are your thoughts on that? Could you?
Sure. Well, first of all, the thought process behind the residency requirement is to ensure that as many disenfranchised local Virgin Islanders can actually take advantage of the opportunity to obtain a license versus someone from the outside. So it's a matter of interpretation and what will pass legal muster.
Okay. And I think with just listening, we might have to amend to give a definite definition of what the bona fide resident is, because just listening to how the conversation went, that part definitely needs to be cleaned up. I was one of those that went to Denver, and I got quite a bit of information. Bureau of Economic Research, in giving out some of your numbers, could you please share, because I'm not sure if I heard it, what do you think is the top potential of revenues that could be brought in by activating or making this law in our territory?
So, thank you for your question, Dr. Degazan. So, if it depends on if you're asking along the tax rate, you're talking about
1
permits
minute.
and fees, we have registration. So, I categorized it in my testimony just because I felt that would be a question. So, the numbers came directly from the study. So if you want to give me a specific example, I can.
Well, how do you think overall we would do? So if we were to activate and pass this law and within 2 years it's up and running, what kind of revenues do you think on the high end the Virgin Islands could potentially see from your perspective?
30 seconds.
So based on us looking at the indicators that I mentioned before, and let's just focus on the taxes, licensing, and the fee revenue, right? Year one, we're looking at $1 million, a little over $1 million. Year two, 2.678 million. Year three, 4.438 million. And then we go all the way up to a year 7, 8 million. Okay. However, that is just for that category. But throughout the testimony, I mentioned that if we look at it collectively, we're looking at a maturity, which is 7 years, upwards of $24 million.
Okay, thank you.
Time.
Okay, I'll ask other questions later on. Thank you so much. Madam Chair? Hi. Could I ask one last question, or?
You may proceed, Senator.
I appreciate it. The other aspect of it what are the thought process in regards to public education of individuals? This might also come through license. Public education of individuals, and we could call them street pharmaceutical agents, whatever you want to use. But that is still going to be an element within this process. And if that is not something that's tackled where we educate those individuals that might want to become a legal part of this, how do you think that should be handled specifically, and what are we going to do as a community? Because whether we bring in revenues or not, a portion of that money is going to have to go to the police department and other agencies, because it's going to have some kind of social economic effect. Tell me your part in that.
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. As a member of the Cannabis Advisory Board, I can share with you that members of the board, along with Executive Director Cardi of the OCR, that is actually one of the mandates that we are putting together, as we speak, to roll out and put together RFPs or RFIs for persons or groups who can actually not only educate the enforcement side, but also the persons who we want to create the social equity within, such as our local stakeholders, persons who are interested, what they need to do, whether they're cultivators, whether dispensaries, whether they're even users, because some people at this point think, well, why we even need this? We already have the source. Well, quite frankly, if you regulate it, then the source will actually be safer. There's some persons who are, tampering with pesticides and things like that, allegedly. So in this manner, hopefully, once we get the project going and everyone's educated, everyone will actually it'll be a much safer Virgin Islands, because people are using the cannabis anyway, whether for medicinal purposes or sacramental or just, non-certified use.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, for the additional time.
Thank you, Senator Francis Heiliger. And from Senator Alma Francis Heiliger. So I'm going to allow you a point of inquiry, and then we're going to close this meeting. So you may proceed, Senator.
Thank you. Good evening once again. Quick through the chair to Office of Economic Research and or Ms. Laron. When we went to Denver, they did talk about the potential revenues of, on the low end was 25 million, which she reflected and shared earlier today based on their analysis. And the high end, if we kind of get lucky, would have been like 40 million. But the reason why I question that was, if we bring in those type of revenues, they also spoke about a chunk of it having to now be disbursed because of the potential negative side, which would then go to the police, human services, health, which would reduce that revenue. But the main question I want to ask is, when I spoke to members of the administration, they said their biggest thing they saw is potentially creating patents for strains of different types of marijuana patented to the Virgin Islands as a way of bringing in revenue. And that's the way they saw we would potentially bring in major monies outside of the regular retail, which is 25 million on the low, 40 million on the high. What are your thoughts on that? Because if we're also looking at it from a scientific standpoint of creating strands or strains to bring money, how does that work? Thank you very much.
The question is for whom?